पाश्चात्य देश का जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Today we are continuing reading the book Namacharya, The Life of Srila Haridasa Thakur by his grace Rupa Vilasa Das. Preface. In late 15th century, Bengal, roughly comprised of what is now known as Bangladesh and West Bengal, along with parts of Bihar, Tripura, and Orissa, where Bengali remains the native language. The socio-religious climate was complex, with many competing forces at work. Bengal was under Muslim rule due to the Turco-Afghan invasion. The Vaishnava scholar Stephen Rosen states in his book The Life and Times of Lord Chaitanya, citing the historian Dilip Kumar Mukherjee. Wave after wave of alien hordes had come from across the Hindu Hindu Kush mountains, and after an orgy of pillaging, raping, and slaying, made themselves masters of the country. Initially, there was an attempt to convert by sword, but in the end, conversion to Islam or other religious cults was often affected by the policies of the rigid caste system, and in particular the smartas, caste Brahmanas, who considered that birth in a Brahmana family was sufficient to confer an exalted religious and social status. The fallacious notion created a tendency in the other castes to embrace Islam due to its more liberal social philosophy. The Muslim conquest of Bengal had greatly disturbed Hindu society. Thousands upon thousands of Hindus had been converted to Islam either by force or by a desire for upward social mobility, which was impossible under the rigid caste system enforced by the caste conscious smartas. The Smarta Brahmanas kept a tight grip on what they thought was orthodox Hinduism by establishing incredibly complex ritualistic performances, which became increasingly numerous. Without a sophisticated knowledge of Sanskrit and a long study of all the complex rituals, no one could effectively challenge their authority. However, other people, folk cults sprang up in answer, propagating concrete forms of demigod worship like those of Manasa, Chani, and Dharma. Tantric black magic rituals became popular, and Tantrika Kaulakara, with its rituals involving wine and flesh, became prominent and posed a challenge to the Hindu society. The Tantrics even claimed that Krishna worship was Tantric in origin, which alarmed the Smartas as well as the Vaishnavas, who were at that time a minority in Navadvipa. The Smartas, much like the biblical Crises were interested in maintaining their position of authority due to the lucrative nature of performing the rituals thought to be essential by many members of Hindu society, since many of the non-Vedic cults did not directly challenge their authority. Some smarter recognition was afforded them. Dr. Ramakanta Chakravarti writes, the smarta recognition of some of the un-Vedic cults reflected their popularity. Secondly, these cults did not challenge the social or ritual supremacy of the Brahmanas or the Brahminical priests. Thirdly, the Brahminical recognition of some of these cults probably signified a half-hearted attempt on the part of the Brahmanas to establish some sort of social integration of the Hindu castes and sectors. The rituals of the Smartas had become a trade with vested interests. The singular fact was that the Sultanate of Bengal did not interfere with them. The predominance of the Hindu rituals and the continuance of the Muhammadian autocracy were perhaps complementary developments. Thus, the Smartas did not want the status quo to change. Despite challenges from the folk cults and the tantrics, they maintained their supremacy with the aid of the Mughal administrators. As thousands of Hindus had been converted into Islam, the only response of the Smartas was to stress on Suddhi or purification. The rituals were made into formal rites, which were compulsory for all Hindus. They never recognized the necessity of preaching Hinduism to the fringe of Hindu society, the lower castes. Such Brahmanas never considered that this program could be effective in buttressing and enriching Hindu society. Dr. Chakravarti writes the intelligent Brahmanas either lacked the courage to adopt that program or lacked the intelligence to think of it. Their whole purpose was to categorize, describe, and multiply useless rituals. It has also been clearly stated by Barbosa that the Hindus of the upper castes were regularly embracing Islam with a view to receiving favor from the ruling Mohammedans. In short, due to spiritual blindness and lack of spiritual intelligence, as well as material motivations for wealth, social prestige, and distinction, the Smartas utterly neglected the actual spiritual welfare of the people, as well as their own welfare. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura summarizes this difficult period of history as follows. It is necessary to have some idea of the state of society in Bengal at that period in order to be able to understand the significance of the Thakuras Haridasa's appearance. The caste system had lost all its property and its propriety, and its so-called purity was only another name for oppressive practices due to the grossest abuse of its principles. The views regarding religion that were then upheld by the public opinion of the so called religious communities were nothing but the infuriated expression of sectarian rancor. On the other hand, the rotten Hindu society was swollen with the lower grades of its own strata and on the other in the name of religion. They endeavored merely to realize selfish ambitions. Their practice of religion took the forms of hostility to Vaishnavas and attacks of the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion of all Jivas. The meanness of the selfish contempt for the true faith and wanton cruelty expressed showed all the virulence of the chronic disease that had penetrated to the very bones and marrow of the Hindu society. On the other hand, the narrow minded Yavana Sampradaya Muslim community was enacting scenes of malice, hatred, aggression, and oppression towards the Hindu community. The Yavana society, failing to appreciate the true greatness of Hinduism, never desisted from its persistent and many sided activities against the religion of the Hindus. The Aryas and Yavanas of Bengal were acting towards each other on the conviction that the dharma of man was based on the principle of mutual animosity, leading to unjustifiable attacks on the mode of worship of each by the other. The contending passions of the two parties brought untold suffering on society in Bengal. Generally, people were devoid of all religious association and were demoralized by every form of luxury which they held in high estimation along with the pleasures of the world and material power. External display had become so prominent in all the religious practices of the Hindus that would be no exaggeration to say that there was not a single person who had any sympathy for the method of artless devotion. Under the impression that the attainment of the kingdom of the next world was a feat as difficult as the crossing of the highest mountain peaks. The difficult methods of yoga, arduous vratas, overt observances such as Chandrayana, etc., severe brahmacharya and sannyasa, asceticism, etc., were pointed out as the paths of leading to bhukti, enjoyment, or mukti, annihilation, as they had doubts regarding the possibility of attainment of the tribal fruits of dharma, artha, and kama by offensive taking of the name and of mukti. The goal of so called Vedantist practices by taking the dimly perceived name, the Hindus had absolutely no respect for the straight path of devotion.
You can summarize, Mother.
Yeah. So in the late 15th century, Bengal was roughly comprised of what it is now known as Bangladesh and West Bengal. So in the they initially they were attempt to like convert the Hindus to Muslims by using in the unritual practices like by using sword and all, and later they're using some the rigid caste system by by differentiating between the Brahmanas and the other lower caste systems, and even though the some of the Brahmanas, the fallacious notion tendency in other castes to embrace Islam to be more liberal. So however, the smartas means like um, very interested in maintaining the position of authority because previously in the Brahmanas is mostly the upper caste in the Hinduism, so they always wanted to be in the highest position due to their authority. So to maintain those authority, they're lacking to say that to encourage the other people in not converting into Hinduism into Muslims. So the tantrics even claimed that Krishna worship was tantric in origin, which alarmed the Smartas as well as the Vaishnavas, who were at the time a minority, like in Dvipa. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur summarizes that it is necessary to have like some idea of the state of society in Bengal at that period in order to understand the significance of Haridasa's appearance. The caste system almost lost its priority, and they used to say it's like purity, and also it's they almost lost its all propriety, and the purity was also was only another name for the practices like the oppressive practices they have been doing it, and the Aryas and the Yavanas of Bengal were acting towards each other on the conviction that the dharma of man was based on the principle of mutual thing, leading to the unjustifiable acts on the mode of worship of each other, and they also they are also doing the external display, like doing all the religious practices of the Hindus. There would be no exaggeration. Like there is not a single person who had sympathy on the method of like artless devotion, and that the impression of the kingdom. They are doing like different kinds of yoga, the vratas, and, and like they were point out as some paths like bhukti, mukti, and they had doubts regarding the possibility of attainment of that tribal fruits of Dharma, Artha, Kama by offensive talking of the name. The Hindus had absolutely no respect for the straight path of the devotion, and as thousands of Hindus had been converted into Islam, the only response of the Brahmanas was to stress on Suddhi or purification. These rituals were made into formal, which was compulsory for the Hindus. Um, Actually, they never recognized the necessity of preaching Hinduism to the lower caste system. Because if they preach the Hinduism to the lower caste system, they thought the they will lost the Brahmanas thought they lost their priority. Um, so the whole purpose was to categorize, describe, and uh, these useless rituals. It also has been clearly stated by Barbosa that the Hindus of the upper caste were regularly embracing Islam with view to receiving a favor from their ruling Mohammedans. Hmm. It, in short, like due to the spiritual blindness and lack of spiritual intelligence, it's like superstition means as well as the motivations for wealth and social prestige. And the Brahmanas utterly neglected actually spiritual welfare of the people. Yeah, they neglected the welfare of the people and they try to maintain their wealth and the social status by encouraging the ruling the Muslim people as well as their own welfare. Yeah, yeah. I want to uh, end my